What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Smashing Pumpkins, and we're returning to Adore. Thank you again to Sofia for sharing this album. And I'm intrigued by the next title in the playlist because it looks, at first glance, like a more normal English spelling of apples and oranges, a phrase which is used idiomatically to refer to two things which maybe superficially, or indeed at first glance, might seem like they're related and maybe share some larger scale of connection, being two different types of fruit, but on a closer inspection are fundamentally different, and thus the implication is they should not be viewed in the same context. They should not be classified together, but they are actually inhabiting different categories. But it's spelled like Appels and Oranjes, which is to say, I don't know if it is in fact more or less that idiomatic meaning, because there's an eccentric or non-standard English spelling. So yeah, I wonder what is actually at play here. I'll try to catch what I can. This is Smashing Pumpkins, and as I said, the track looks like at first glance apples and oranges, but is spelled Appels and Oranjes from Adore, 1998. I thought it was going to be maybe like one measure more, but I knew it was about to to end very abruptly. That's an incredible tune for multiple reasons. Okay, so first sonically, it has this very frenetic, like percussive, driven character, and the percussion and the rhythm is really the standout sonic feature. But there's also some electrical touches in there, including like a electrometallic type of quality, meaning electrified, but also taking the shape and the tenor of something metallic. Billy's vocals, although they are a bit buried in the mix, they also sound like ubiquitous, meaning not necessarily echoic, but you know how like when you're near a cricket, it sounds like it's coming from every direction at the same time, which I think relates to not only the way they make the sound, but the way that cricket ears work, whereas like ours are sort of like funnels, so we get a better sense of like where something is coming from, like, or why actually we can't really hear with great clarity necessarily the direction of something, whereas their ears work more like weather vanes, so like they have a better sense of like directional origin. But yeah, it sounds like his voice is both like ever present and coming from all the directions at the same time without necessarily sounding like an echo, or at least that's the way his vocal performance hit me here, or like the rendering of his vocals hit me. But lyrically, I'm fascinated because it sounds like a series of questions, most of which are hypothetical and or rhetorical, but also specifically directed, and at least in one or two cases, like what are you going to do, they seem actually very purposeful and like you would be expecting an answer. But a lot of them are really interesting in terms of speaking to our natural environment as well as our like created technological environment, but posing hypotheticals that would suggest a very different dynamic. Like, what if the sun refused to shine? What if the earth refused to turn? What if the clouds refused to rain? I think there was even a line, maybe like, what if the stars hesitated, but also like, what if our clocks hesitated or didn't, tick the way they do? So it's like he's talking about scenarios which would be, again, a very different type of reality. And again, I think at least a couple of the questions were like, what is it, something about like, what would you want that's something new, or would you be prepared essentially for something very new? And like, what would you do? So it's like he's posing these theoretical scenarios specifically to another person, many of which relate to our environment, the world we live in, the environmental conditions, and of course, again, the technological or like infrastructural situations that we find ourselves in on a day-to-day level. But what would you do if they were very different? Would you be ready for something new? And I wonder, again, if it's like you is here a broader you, like, anyone who happens to be listening, or the human species as a whole, or whether this could be more specific about another person. But a really sonically compelling track for all the reasons I mentioned, and there was, again, some melodic flourishes and like electronically that really stuck out to me, as well as, again, the driving percussion of the tune overall. And lyrically, it's like a philosophical exploration of possibility, but also the rejection or turning on its head of many of the regularities and conditions that dominate our lives or provide the situational and environmental backdrop of regularity. So yeah, it's a really interesting one lyrically. I look forward to any insight, but just on the surface of it, in terms of like the creativity of the questions being asked, I found it highly compelling. So a really cool one. It felt short. I want to say like 4 minutes or shorter. Not that 4 minutes is particularly short. Okay, so like 3.5. So yeah, on the shorter end. I mean, we've heard some tunes from them 7-8 minutes. So yeah, in the grand scheme of their discography, a shorter one, but a lot of interest and artistic expression contained sonically and lyrically within those 3.5 minutes. So yeah, I love this one. Let me know what you think, and I will see you for the next one. Peace.